Okay, so in this video, we will begin the beginner's guide to Pygame Zero. So there's already a Pygame beginner's guide. This is for Pygame Zero. So this is using the Pygame Zero library instead of Pygame. So you'll want to go to github.com Programming Rainbow Beginner's Guide to Pygame Zero. You want to clone that repository. The path already exists for me, so I've already done it. Okay, so after you're doing that, you're going to move inside of it, and let's look at what we have in this directory. So we have fonts, images, music, and sounds. These are the assets we're going to be using for this project. And we also have all the code for all the videos. So if you want to look at the code for any one of the videos, they're going to be in each one of these files, or folders, directories, whatever you want to call it. Okay, and it's just a single file. It is the main.py file. So this main.py is going to be just a single file that is going to do our whole project. So I would like to quickly show what this project's going to build, and then we will talk a little bit about Pygame Zero. So this is the final project, what it'll look like. About 123 lines of code. And let me just run it. Okay, so I actually need to be in the, yeah, right there.
Python.
Okay, so I can, it's going to say zero every time it bounces off the wall. Every time I press spacebar, it's going to say
Pygame Zero.
Python.
Pygame Zero.
I've muted the music, and every time I press the spacebar, it also changes the background.
Pygame Zero.
And it has a title up here. It has a window icon. It has all the things that you need, and it takes input from moving the sprite around.
Pygame Zero.
So that's kind of the end project. But before we start anything, some people might be coming here because this is the first game that they ever build, and they are starting out in programming, and they've been directed towards the Pygame Zero. So they're going to be directed towards here. This is they've been told that this is a great place if you don't know anything about programming to start programming with. And this also says Pygame Zero is for creating games without boilerplate. So boilerplate is when you need to write a bunch of code before you even start. And if you followed any of my other series, the Go series, the C, C++, C++2, COBOL, any of those, you're going to see that the very first video is very long because we need to write 100 or more lines of code before we even open and close a simple window. And so that's what they're talking about here, but they're not talking about just boilerplate in that. They're talking about boilerplate in Pygame, okay? So there's so many problems. I just want to rant for a little bit about Pygame Zero before we start building. So Pygame Zero, if you are here as a new person to programming, I strongly suggest that you do not start here, and I'll show you why. So Pygame Zero is Pygame without the boilerplate. So what is Pygame? Well, Pygame is this Python library that is actually a Python wrapper for the C library that is SDL2. SDL2 is this awesome library that allows you to make games in many different languages, but it's written in C. So somebody has made the Python implementation that basically talks to that C library, and it's called Pygame. And it also works really well. But somebody else thought this is too complicated to get up and running. There's too much code before we can just do something. So they've simplified this down to Pygame Zero. So just for fun, I would like to show you the entire project here. So this entire project is 123 lines of code, okay? Now, what would this project look like in Pygame? Not Pygame Zero, but just original Pygame. So here's the Pygame project that I've already done that you can look at the videos on, and it is 119 lines of code. Now, this does the exact same thing. So this is the exact same project, but it's written in Pygame, not Pygame Zero.
Python.
And it does the exact same thing. Okay? It's smaller. So where is the boilerplate? I actually don't know. I don't know where the boilerplate is. Pygame is not that complicated, and Pygame Zero doesn't simplify it. It actually makes it a little bit more frustrating. But let's see how many lines of code it would be in Ruby. So this is the Ruby project. If I was doing Ruby Gosu, which again is another wrapper for STL, but in the Ruby language, and we have 108 lines of code. Okay, so let's look at the Lua Love version of this exact same project. This is written in Lua. This is using the Love 2D, which again is STL. And this is 113 lines of code. So basically, if you're using an interpreted language for this project, it's going to be around 100 lines of code. So, but Pygame Zero is the largest one by far. It's 123 lines of code. Okay, so that's one problem, but that's not the big problem with this. The big problem with this is was my entry point into programming, the Python and Pygame Zero specifically, because there's many books in the library about this. And the problem is this Pygame Zero library is very, very buggy. It does not run correctly. It's got bugs in it. It's not going to do what you think it does. It's not well supported. It hasn't been updated, let's see, in years. It doesn't play well. It's very brittle. It relies on Pygame. So it's just a wrapper around Pygame, but it's brittle and it's broken a lot, and it just doesn't work. And if you're a brand new person to programming, you have enough problems just understanding how Python language works, and enough problems making your own game or following instructions how to make a game, and then chasing down bugs that you may have made by mistyping something or syntax errors or whatever. You also don't need the added complexity of actually the library has bugs that you just don't know about and you can't fix. And when you try to follow the book, they just simply will not work. So when I started out, like again, this became so frustrating, I almost didn't go further than this. This almost stopped me completely going any further in programming because it was such a bad experience. But I had already have a long history in computers and running Linux. I used to run my own Linux distro. I went to advanced computers school in the Navy. And so this was my first dive into programming, and it was just a very bad experience. And when I went to C after that, it was easier. Even though I couldn't find as much information, and C is harder language to deal with, it was actually easier because of the huge amount of problems I had with Pygame Zero specifically, Pygame Zero. So I just want to say, if this is the first place, I think the better option would be Pygame. But what would be better than Pygame would actually be Ruby. And what would be the absolute best place to start would be Love 2D. If you are new to programming, you should definitely start with Love 2D and the Lua language. If you already know Python, I would say you should use Pygame. But if you really want to know about Pygame Zero, let's talk about Pygame Zero. So there is some issues. Well, let's just go to the page again. There's so many issues with this. So I'm going to close these down. So Lord Maeve, as he calls himself, he hasn't really updated this in years, and the bugs are still there. So how do we install Pygame Zero? Well, we need to use pip unless it's installed on your distro. For me, I'm using Arch, and it does have Pygame and everything installed, but I can't just sudo pacman. Let's see. I think it's PG0, and it would be Python PG0 if it was a package, and if I spelled it right. But it is not a package. So the way that you're meant to install this, I have to say the documentation is really good. I really like the documentation on Pygame Zero. It's not all negatives. It's just the fact that when you're a new person and you're learning, the thing just needs to work. So here is how you install Pygame Zero. You use the pip command. So let's do that. Pip install pg0. And guess what? That does not work. You cannot do that. If you're in a managed environment where you have packages from your package manager, say Arch Linux or other distros, it's going to tell you, hey, you can't do this. and there's not its own package. So what you actually need to do is create your own Python virtual environment. So you would need to do something like this. I'm going to remove it first. So I have my basically a folder in my home directory that is hidden called .venv. And I don't know what name you should use because I don't do this too much, but that's what I've called mine. So you can go Python -m venv, and then the folder that the target that you want to be able to make your own Python environment in. Okay, so that creates that. And then you're going to want to source it, but I'm not using bash, I'm using fish, because fish is much better to use than bash. So I need to do something like source, and I need to actually source a bin file in there called activate, but it needs to be activate.fish as far as I remember. Yes. Now, when I see this right here, I'm in this managed environment. Now I can, or not managed environment, this virtual Python thing that's kind of outside of the scope of my normal system. Now I can do this pip install Pygame. Okay. So if you are a brand new person to programming, this is already too much. This is way too much. You know, if I was just doing Lua and love, I just need to, if I'm in Windows, I can literally just drag a blank file onto the love icon and it works. In Linux, I can just say install love and that works, and then just type love. That's so easy. If I was in Ruby, I can just say gem install gosu. I'm already done. In Python, it's already a headache, and this isn't a bug or anything. This is just complicated setup, and this is not going to be in the books. The website just says, "Hey, run pip install, you're good to go." And even Pygame, to be honest, does the same. However, Pygame is big enough that it is already a package for my thing, so I can just use my package manager to install Pygame. So that's already a little bit of a headache if you're just kind of a beginner person, and you're going to have to deal with that depending on what environment you're on. Okay, so you have that up and running. If you were, let's just quit out of this. I should have this source activated before I go into it. Now, if I go into it, my terminal that I open up down here, my terminal is already using this environment, this Python environment. That's why the very first time I went to run the game in the beginning of this video, it didn't work. And I needed to source the environment. Now it's already done because I just did that before I even opened up the NeoVim. Okay, so that's a little bit of a headache. It's not a bug or anything. It's just Python, the fun of Python. And when you're working with a package outside of the standard. So what I want to do is I want to start from the beginning. There's a couple things I want to talk about here before. If you're using VS Code, you're probably using Pylint for your linting, for your kind of what is like to check to see if your code is writing is correct. And it's going to complain if you are not using doc strings in the beginning of functions, in the beginning of classes, modules. And I'm not doing any of that because to me, you should be writing your code that is self-documenting. You shouldn't be writing doc strings like that, but maybe there's a reason to do that. So this project, we're not going to do that. So you're going to get a lot of warnings. To squash those warnings, not in NeoVim, but in VS Code, you will need all three of these. You're going to do a hash space Pylint : space, and then disable equals missing function docstring, and then module docstring and class docstring. You'll need all three of those. That's just a Python thing. That has nothing specific to do with Pygame Zero or Pygame. But also when you go to import Pygame Zero, because I think it's the module is the people who created it didn't really do it correctly, or maybe just the way the Python language works. But it says that there are problems with this module. To get it to stop complaining on both NeoVim and VS Code, you will need to add even more. So if I remove these, I get this right here. So let's go. So I have two. I have an error and a warning. It says cannot find implementation or library stub for module name PGZ run. This is actually a problem with the way they've made Pygame Zero. That is kind of the fault of the developers, and you can't do anything about that. And then there's another warning about missing imports. And so you're going to get this in NeoVim and VS Code. It's just going to say this module is not good. And so to deal with that, we're just going to put these. The type ignore is for, I'm using Pyrite in NeoVim. And this type ignore is for Pyrite. And for Pylint, it is disable equals E0401. And then on top of that, when we try to use all the built-ins, they're all going to go crazy. I think VS Code and NeoVim, it's just going to say, I don't know what rect is. I don't know what actor is. I don't know what keyboard. So we can squash some of them by saying from PZ. So this isn't strictly needed to run the program. This is just needed to make your editor not complain about this. So Pylint and Pyrite are going to complain about not knowing what these things are. So we're using this from PG0 built-ins import, but then again, it complains about that command. So we have to tell it to stop complaining about specifically this command. So we can tell it that it knows about these things, so it stops complaining all the way down in the rest of the code. And you're just going to get tons of complaints. So it is quite a headache for this thing. So again, the type ignore is for Pyrite, and Pylint, that is to stop this complaining. And these here are just to stop it complaining down here. It has nothing to do with the code. It's just for your linters. And then later on, you're still going to have anything with screen in it. You're going to need to do for both. I have three different things that are complaining here. Pylint, Pyrite, and I think Pyflakes is the other one here. And you'll need all three of these. Every time you use the word screen, if you don't, you're going to get a bunch of errors and warnings, and it has nothing to do with your code being wrong. And again, here for sounds, I have to, just for NeoVim, I need to ignore. And imagine if you are new to programming, if you're doing exactly what it says in the book, you are just going to, your editor is just going to light up like a Christmas tree. It's just going to say you're doing all these things wrong, and that's assuming your code even works correctly. And the code will still run. It's giving you these kind of false positives because the way that the module is set up, it's not good. But we will have some actual other problems later. So let's delete this file and let's start from the beginning. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy this right here just so I don't have to retype it. I'm just gonna yank that. I'm gonna delete this file. And I'm going to create a file named main.py. Sorry, that was a long rant about Pygame Zero, and I don't mean to be so negative about it. It's just, it has a lot of problems, and it could deter people from learning to program, I think, and it almost did me. So I have this blank file, and I'm just going to paste in those messages. Again, that's for Pylint for VS Code. It's not actually affecting me, but I do want it to be here for the project. The top line up here is a shebang, and this just tells the environment that, hey, this is a Python. You do not need this. If you're in Windows, this won't do anything. If you're in Mac or if you're in a Unix environment, what this allows you to do is that it actually allows you to actually run this as a standalone binary instead of using the Python command if you make it executable. So you don't need this. This is not really part of the project. I've just added it there. So the first thing we need to do is import Pygame Zero. And it's PG0. Okay, and this is going to give us some errors and warnings. Begin again because of the issues with Pygame Zero. But I'm just going to put 2 spaces after this and put a hash. So in Python, these hashes mean that this is ignored, but also the linters will look at them and say, this is a special directive for the linter. So in one hand, it can be just viewed as a comment, but on the other hand, the linter might say, oh, that's actually a directive to me. So for Pywrite, this type colon ignore, will tell Pywrite to stop complaining. And now we see we still have a warning here. So that's a different one. Oh, no. That's fine. It's just because I'm not using it. But if you're in VS Code, you'll need this other one. You'll need the pylint. That's assuming you're using pylint. And disable. And this is going to be E0401. Okay? And now a lot of the Pygame and Pygame Zero will show you. So this documentation is really good, and we're going to cover this, but this is going to show us to do some things. I think it is doing it in here. Yeah. It's going to show us code where we're making constants that are global and variables that are global. Now, if I start doing that, my linters are going to start complaining because you're not supposed to do this. Let's see here. I'm just trying to find some code that... These are just showing code snippets, so they're not really showing it, but I think maybe the Pygame one does. Just normal Pygame actually shows. But so what we need to do is we need a class, because we can make global constants, but if we start making global variables, it's really bad practice, and you shouldn't do that. So I am going to put some constants. So if you don't know the difference, a constant is something that will never change in the program. It'll always stay the same. But a variable is something that's going to change. And it's really bad practice to make something that is global. Like if I made some playing variable equals like true, right? And I could switch this later to false. This is a global variable. This mutates. This is something that varies. And you shouldn't do this. So I'm not going to show you how to do that. What I'm going to do, though, is use a couple global constants. So I'm just going to name them game constant. And these simple ones are actually looked for by Pygame. So these are built in. So if you want to change the width of the screen and the height of the screen, let's see, it's right here, creating a window. This width right here, if Pygame Zero sees that this exists, it's going to use it. So if it sees it's 300 and the height is 300, it's going to make a square 300 by 300. So this is a built-in thing. This is something that if it finds that you've written it, the width and height controls the width and height of the window. Yeah, it's gonna use it. So that's fine. It's a constant. It's a global. It's looking for it. So this is something that's already hooking into. And so we're just going to set it. I'm going to set it to 800. And the height, I'm going to set that to 600. And it also looks for the title. So you know right now up here this says NeoVim Beginner's Guide to Python. That's the title of this screen right here. But when we open up a game, we want our title, or if you're on a floating window manager, it might just be above there. We want to be able to change that. So again, Pygame Zero, trying to be really easy to use and trying to be helpful. It's just, if you just use the capitalized word title, it's going to use that automatically for you. So that's what Pygame Zero is meant to do. It's meant to make things easy for you. It's just when it doesn't work that is a problem. So we can just put a string here, and that will be the title. So we'll just say open and close, because that's what we're going to do here. Okay. So again, these are constants. These are not going to change. So variables, I need to store them somewhere. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a class. I'm going to store them inside the class. When they say no boilerplate, what they mean is they're actually automatically looking for, and if we look back at here, where is it? So right here, so right here is your global variable that we're not going to do. But this is how you make an actor sprite. And this is how you set the position. And then this is your width and your height. So that's really great. And then this is drawing it. But what you're missing here is the update. So if Pygame Zero sees width, it uses it. If it sees height, it uses it. If it sees you've defined something called draw, it knows that this is where you're drawing your game objects, and it's going to automatically call this function. You don't need to call it. Pygame Zero calls it for you. And there's another one called update. Now this becomes a problem with the books, because if this is not called, your screen will not refresh. And if you're following the books, they won't work. So I'm going to just show you. So the def draw, now this is something that's already been defined, and you're just you're saying what this function should be doing. It's already looking for this function. We could just clear the screen. So we'll clear the screen, and that should be good enough. And then a lot of the books, they might have you draw something here. Or we could draw something. Let me just, well, yeah, let's just show that since it's simple enough. Up here in images, I have background.png. But we'll get to it. Let me just show you the screen first. So it did complain about this undefined. That's the, remember what I said would need to, and it will complain about this in both NeoVim and VS Code will complain about this. Disable. I'm reading my notes here. I always forget. It's 0602, and we have 3 of them here. There's no QA F821, and then type or. Okay, that's fine. So if we do this, and then we should just be able to open up a window with this. I just kind of want to show you this in stages. To actually use this, we need to run the pgz go. So that's why it's still complaining up here. We're not accessing it. So pgz run.go. So we've imported pg0, and then we are using pgz run.go to run this. This is kind of going to run the interpreter that's going to look for, is it got this? I'm going to use this. I'm going to use this. Now I'm going to call this draw. Oh, no, I imported the wrong thing up here. Sorry, this isn't pg0. It's confusing. It's pgz run. Okay. So we should just get a screen that opens. So let's check that. I'm going to run it with Python, and then it's main.py. Okay. I got this screen, and it looks a little messed up here. And I think we'll see why in a second here. Let me just close this. So I do want to draw something, but I want to show you this first. So if I define update, this is another built-in kind of, where is it? Built-in. Yeah. So draw, if it sees this, it's automatically going to call this function for you. And if it sees update, it's automatically going to call this function for you too. And also, if you pass DT into it, it's going to give you delta time. We're not going to deal with delta time in this project, but if it sees these, it's automatically going to do this. So remember how the screen looked a little garbled last time on the top? I'm just going to put this in. Sorry, I should have put a colon. And I'm going to put pass. And there it looks fine, okay? So what's going on here? Well, if you follow the books that you get from the library, and they show you how to program a Python, and they use Pygame Zero, they don't tell you to do this, okay? So where is it here? If it sees this update, it's actually going to call this 60 times a second. They will be called repeatedly 60 times a second, yeah. If it sees update. If it doesn't see update, it doesn't do anything. So if we were to comment this out, it loads it up, but it never refreshes the screen. And this and the books will even tell you that, and the books will tell you to do it, and they won't tell you to add in the update. And you think that you should see this image. They'll tell you to load an image, and you don't see the image. And you think, I'm doing something wrong. There's something wrong here. And it's not. There's something wrong in Pygame Zero. and they haven't told you that you in fact need this no matter what. Even if there's no code in there and you just put pass, you need this here. If this isn't here, it doesn't bother to refresh the screen. So if the screen doesn't get drawn before it gets displayed to you, if it gets displayed first, it doesn't refresh and draw whatever needs to be on the screen. And this is a huge. So if you don't, let me try to draw an image, and I'll just show you what that looks like. I'll use the blit. It's not meant for this video, but I just kind of want to show you that if you're using books from library, anything, there's lots of problems with this. And once you find them out, it's not too big of a deal. But yeah, so if I use screen.blit, and what this is this is how you draw something to the screen. So in the screen object, this is kind of what's being displayed for you. We can clear the screen. It resets it to black. We can fill it to a color. We can blit an image to it if we have a surface already, or we can just put a string in it, and then we can put the left top coordinates. Like 0, 0, 0 would be right up here in the top hand corner, or of your screen, the top hand corner of your screen, how you want the image to be displayed. So I'm going to blit the background. I'm kind of skipping ahead, but I just kind of want to show what's going on here. So we're going to use the relative path. We're running this from here. This is the image folders. It's called background PNG. So I'm going to say images. Oh, no, sorry. I don't need to do that. Again, because they're trying to make it easy for you, it's automatically looking for images in the images folder. I forgot about that. So we can just put background. And not even PNG, I don't think. Yeah, we can just put background in here. And then here we would do a tuple. Checking my notes. Yeah, I couldn't remember. Yeah, it's just a tuple. And we'll just put 0, 0. And it's going to complain. Screen is not. I'm just going to leave that there for a minute. And we have this background image. So now, does it run if we get rid of this? And see, this is what you would have in the book. The book would tell you to do this. And this was, I know this now, and this is just simple and stupid for me. And most people who already know Python will just say, this is no big deal. I would just automatically know this. But you have to put yourselves in the shoes of somebody who doesn't know yet how to program, doesn't know if the problem is their fault or what's going on. And they're just told in the book, just do this thing. It opens a window. Now do this. It draws the thing. And they get this black screen. And it does not work. And it's not your fault. It's not your code's fault at all. This is not your code's fault. This is not your code's fault. It not being displayed on the screen is not your code's fault. It's because the library requires this. Even if nothing's in the update, it requires this to be here, but yet it doesn't say that it does, and the book doesn't say that it does. And this is going back years. I believe I have a bug report in there for 2 or 3 years ago. And as far as I know, it's, well, as we've seen, it is still there. It's still a bug. There we go, and it's displayed again. Yeah, so that all kinds of problems. So let's move forward, and just what I want to do is I don't want them here like this, and I want to store everything in a class. So I'm going to real quickly make a class, and I'm going to link it up to these built-ins. If it sees this draw, it's going to draw everything. I don't need it. I didn't call the draw or the update anywhere down here. This right here will look for this. And if it sees this, it's going to start hitting these both at 60 times a second. But if it doesn't see this, it draws this one time maybe and displays it to you. But it could also display it to you first, and then it doesn't actually get drawn. And you don't know what's going to happen. But if it sees this guy, it's going to keep refreshing the screen over and over again, and you'll definitely see it. So yeah, I'm going to copy this right here. So here, and I'm just going to paste it here so it doesn't complain. Okay, I need to move it now that it's done that. I need it to be up here now. Okay, Okay, yeah. So if it's a single line like this, you put it here, but if it's run into 3 lines, you need it to be on the top line here. So it needs to be like this. And my auto formatting had formatted it that way. So yeah, so I'm just going to set up a simple class, and I'm going to link it into these two things right here. Nothing complicated. I know classes can be a little bit much, but it's required. You have to use a class in Python. Otherwise, you have global variables. So this is class game. And I want to hold that background. I'm just going to hold this string in a variable. So I'm going to have a little the little initializer constructor. I forgot what it's called in Python. Self. And I'm just holding the string, and I'm going to hold it in a variable called background. You can actually use the surface, but we're just keeping it simple. So that's it for that. And we're actually going to have a color. We'll add that a little bit later. I just want to set up the skeleton. So I have this. I'm going to define two methods, two kind of member functions to this class. So we'll call them methods. And it's going to be draw. This is just shadowing the what it's already looking for. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put this draw code in here. This is just because I'm using a class, so I'm just kind of going to plug it in. So I'm going to put my code here, and then I'm going to call my game draw code from here. Now, it might complain about that because I haven't done the instance of the game yet. But let's see. Yeah, there we go. So this will be game.draw. And this game doesn't exist yet, so let me just create it up here. We have to make an instance of this game class. So we have a class, we need an instance of it. So it'll be game equals game. So that gives us an instance of this game class called game. And then we know that Pygame Zero is going to automatically call this function. And when it gets this function, it's going to just hook it up to the draw one. And we're going to do the same thing with the update. We'll just put a pass in there for now. Pass, if you don't know in Python, it just allows you to have a function there with no code in it yet. So when it sees it, it just returns right away from it. So down here, I'm going to say game.update. That will be fine. Okay, so basically, it's going to hook in to, we've defined a class up here. We have made an instance of it. And now whenever it calls our draw, it's calling the game draw one that is here. And every time it sees calls the update, it's going to call this update. And this is still going to happen 60 times a second because Pygame is going to do that when it sees this update exists. It's going to keep calling these two 60 times a second. Okay, let's just make sure that that works correctly. Okay, that looks fine again. We're still seeing the background image got drawn for us, so that's good. So in the documentation, like I said, I did a lot of complaining about Pygame Zero. It's mostly because anybody who's just starting out programming, this is not the one. But if you already know Python, you're comfortable with Python, you're going to be fine with this. This will be fine. You already know how to deal with Python environments. The little nitpicky bugs you can probably get past yourself. But when you're a new person, that's near impossible. But this documentation is really good. Okay, I really enjoyed the documentation here. It's this one in Love 2D is pretty good. So it's got this stuff here on the left, creating a window. It's just showing you really quickly how to create a window, stuff that we've just covered. Drawing a background. It's just scrolling down a little bit. This is just using a filled color, which is it looks like red, halfway down the red spectrum. But there's some other stuff here that what you'll probably be in is this event hooks. and built-in objects. You'll probably spend a lot of time in these two, and I have them opened up here. So built-in objects will talk about objects, like you have a screen object. You'll have a screen object, and you can do different methods on the screen object, different things with that. You have rectangles, you have music, you have clock, you have an actor, which is the way to do the sprite. You have your keyboard, you can do animation. This is really good. You can click through all this, and it's very simple to understand. It's really nicely documented. Great documentation. Pygame itself, the actual Pygame, the reason why it's less good is because its documentation is really a reference guide to people who know Python. Whereas this is, a beginner can read through this, and this is really good. Really simple, just kind of walks you through it. The other one is the hooks. So those were kind of objects, and these are the things that you can do. So we have the draw, that's a built-in one. We have the update, or the update DT, and it times the game for you. It automatically calls it. If you want to find out if a mouse button was pressed, if you want to find out if a key button was pressed, here's on key down. And this is something we want to do. We want to be able to close the window, not if we just asked it to close. Pygame will already do that, but we can also do it if we want to press escape. So we can use this on key down, and if we put key here, it's going to, this will be the enumeration of whatever key was pressed. And we can check that evaluation against, and it says below, it's right here, all these. And so we could check it against, say, escape. Where's escape? Right here. So let's set that up real quick. We're going to use this function here, and we're just going to use this, on key down. So this is an event. Whenever you press a key down, that event happens. Then when you release it, there's a key up event. So it's not going to tell you you're holding it down. It's just when you press it down, that's an event. So we're going to grab this right here. So I'll put it right here. We're going to do a couple things with this. So I'm going to define it. And this is another thing, it's going to automatically call it for me. So I'm not ever saying to call these. I'm saying to call my class ones, but these automatically get called. Okay, so we have this, and so we can check this key equals something, and we can check and see if it equals escape. We can say if key equals, the key we want is key dot escape. Sorry. We can just exit. Okay, so we can check to see if anytime the escape key is pressed, we'll just exit the program. So this should do the same thing. If we've asked the program to close, it'll exit, or if we've pressed escape. So let's try that. Oops, there we go. So I'm going to press escape, and it's closed. Okay. So I also want to do something is I want to be able to change the, now let me open it one more time. So you can see how we got a picture here, but this is all black. Well, this picture is not actually black. The picture is transparent. So we have, it's a PNG image that is showing the Pygame Zero logo. And this is actually transparent all the way around it. And the renderer color behind this picture is black. So we're seeing the black renderer color. I'm not sure what the screen, that's what they call it in Pygame Zero. This is an SDL2 thing. It's the render, but it's just the Pygame version and the Pygame Zero version on top of it. They're calling it a screen. But anyway, it's black. So this image has a transparent part that's black. So we can change that color. And let's look at that real quick. So that would be part of the screen. So it's a built-in object. We go down to screen right here, part of our screen class. And we already have been running the clear method, but here's a fill method, and it takes red, green, and blue. And this is a fill the color with solid color. Yeah. So this red, green, and blue, it's described somewhere in here. It's a color. Let's see here. This. Okay, it's right here. It's a solid color. This is a tuple that holds red, green, and blue, and it's the range is going from 0 to 255. So we can make any color we want as long as it includes using between 0 and 255 for the red channel, the green channel, and the blue channel. So if we use 000, we get black. 255, 255, 255, we get white. If we use this color right here, we are going to get a medium red color. Okay, so if we just grab this right here at the screen fill, and I'm just going to use that 128 that's already there. And I believe we can just use it. We don't need to run the screen clear. No, we can just run the screen fill. So right here where the screen clear was, I'm just going to put screen fill instead. Because the screen clear is just kind of doing the fill to black, basically. So I'm not sure under the hood if it's doing the exact same thing, but it's, So now we should have this kind of medium red color behind our, yeah, there we go. So we could have a brighter red color, darker red, but that's kind of the medium red. And what I really want to do is I want to be able to press the space bar, and I want to be able to get a random color. So let's just set up the space bar first. I'm going to pull this out into another method in the class. So down here, I'm just going to call it random color. Is that what I called it? Yeah, rand color. So rand color, colon. And what I can do here is I'm going to just save a color here. So I'm going to make a variable. Let's see, is it, yeah, at the top. So up here, I'm going to create a variable that is just a random color. Well, not a random color. I'm going to make it black color. Self.screen. Sorry, not screen. Yeah, screen color is what I'm going to call it. This is not specific to the screen. This has nothing to do with the screen object. It's just this is a color that I'm going to be using to change the screen color. So my variable, I'm naming it screen. And it's a tuple that has 3 numbers in it. And I'm just going to set it to the zeros. So it's going to be black initially. So now that I have this variable down here, when I go down to here, this screen fill, I'm going to instead just put my variable in there, which is self.screen color. So now that my variable's in there, it did it 3 lines in my notes. Let's see if it's going to do that. Oh, it didn't do it here. Okay, cool. So I have this variable set up for color. I'm using it here. And what I can do here in this that I didn't finish out is I can actually set this to a different color. So I'm going to say self.screen color, and let's set it to that. Let's do a green color. So we'll do that, and we'll say 128, because this is red channel, this is green channel, and this is blue channel. So I'll set it there. No, sorry, I should put an equals on this. Okay, so we have this going on. So basically the color is set to black by default. That's in our variable. Our screen fill is using that variable, so it's always going to be set to black every single frame. But if this gets triggered, this random color, it's actually going to change it to dark green. So our screen fill should be dark green over and over again. So what we can do down here is we can add another key in here. We can say if key equals key dot space. That'll be the space key. And then we'll just call that function, which is game dot rand color. So now when we launch the game, we should have black background, but when we press spacebar, it should change to green. There it is. Now if I keep pressing space, it doesn't do anything because it's already set to green. Okay, so what I want is some random colors. Okay, this finally did change to 3 lines, so I need to move this This can be quite annoying. I'm going to move it here to up here. There we go. Okay, so to get random colors in Python, we're just going to use random randint, and I could just import it with import random, which is how I had the code initially when we started. But I can actually just get randint from random because that's the only thing I really actually want to use. So I could say from random import randint. So that will just give me randint, and then later on, when I ever need to use randint, instead of having to say random.randint, I could just say randint because I'm just importing this one thing from random. Okay, so if I were to just say import random, if I just said right here import random, every time I wanted to use randint, which is a method on random, I would have to say random.randint. But now I could just say randint, and I don't need anything else from random, so this is just fine. But you can do it either way. And so what I'm going to do is down here in this random color, I'm going to make some local variables. And I'm going to say R is, and now in my notes I have random.randint, but again, I don't need to do that. I could just say randint. And I can give it two numbers. And it includes both sides. So I want a random number between 0 and 255. And it does include the 0 and it includes the 255. So that's going to give me the whole range. So I'm going to say 0 and 255. Okay, and then I'm going to do it for each of them. So that's red. I'm going to do green. Okay, so that sets up the colors. Now, since I have these all set to basically a random integer, I could just drop them right into here. Oh, sorry, green, blue. Now, every time we press the space bar, we should get a random number. That looks nice. Okay, so let's just check to see that we're not getting the same random numbers every time. So I'm going to look at the first three colors. So I have dark blue, I have green, and pink. So I have green, kind of a peachy, and a pink. So I'm not getting the same colors. So it is seeding randint. I don't need to seed it. It's already pre-seeded. So that's great. Everything's working perfectly there. Pygame Zero also has a built-in way of setting the icon. It looks for a global, and I don't think this is documented. It's like the way that if it sees width, it automatically sets the width, and if it sees height, it automatically sets the height, and if it sees title, it automatically sets your screen title. If you want your window to have an icon, if you set this to an image, it will automatically do that. And also what's frustrating about this is not only is it not really documented, depending on which version of Pygame Zero you use, it might work differently. So this is something they've definitely implemented, but they implemented it differently in different versions, and I don't see it really documented. So icon, that's all you got to do is icon and then the string. Now when we wanted to draw a background image that's in the images folder background, we didn't need to put images because it's always looking in this folder. And we didn't need to put PNG. We just needed to put the name. And that worked. That works for here. And then the blitting, it just needs the name. And actually, this should be the variable. Background. There we go. That's what it was meant to do. I hadn't changed that yet. But this doesn't work with the icon. And it depends, again, on what version. Because if you're on version Pygame Zero 1.2, which I believe is the last version they created, you have to do it this way I'm going to show you. But in 1.3, it is the more correct way, like they're doing here. But I don't believe that they ever released that as the stable version. I think they just kind of stopped working on the project. So it's also not maintained. The Pygame Zero project seems like it hasn't been maintained for 3 to 5 years. And Python has moved on since then. And Pygame relies on Pygame Zero relies on Pygame, and it's also moved on, and so has SDL. So that ends up becoming more and more problems later on. So we need to put images. We need to actually put the path to this image, and I'm going to put the Python logo PNG. So we need to put the whole thing. Okay, so there's images, there's Python logo, PNG right there. But if Pygame Zero sees that this is set, and this is a real image, it will set it as a window image. But if, like I said, if you are using, I think it's like 1.3 or whatever the unstable version, you should just be able to put Python logo. I don't remember if you need PNG or images on there. There might be a bug report on that one too. That was never, okay. So I kind of want to show that this icon is working. So let's just run that one more time. And it's still working, yeah. Okay, to be able to show it, see, I'm using a floating window manager, and it's not showing any Windows icon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up a nested X window session, so I can load up KDE Plasma 6, and then you'll be able to see the logo there, and we can turn it on and off. So let's move over to, let's see here. Yeah, this will be fine. And Zephyr. Okay, so we're still in the same environment. Nothing has changed. I'm not in a virtual environment or anything. I'm just using a different window manager right here. Here's the old one. I'm still in both of them. And here's Plasma. And I'm just going to open up Alacrity. That's my terminal. And you can see the Alacrity logo right here. And down here you can see it. That's the Alacrity logo. So let's go inside the Pygame Zero that we were working on. There we go. And I'm going to run Pygame Zero. Okay. Now here's the window, and it says open and close. That's what we set the title to. And there is the Python logo that we set it to. And down here, it's also, that is the Python logo that we loaded. So if we close this, and we go back here, and I were to comment this out, I'm just going to go back now to, and let's run it again. And see, it's using the Pygame Zero logo right there. That's the Pygame Zero logo. That's the default logo. If you haven't set a logo yourself, it will by default use this logo. So I didn't set this logo. This is just the one that it sets by default up here. And if you do set it, and up here, we'll get rid of that too. We'll just remove all of them. So you can see that I'm in the exact same environment because what I'm changing here is being affected there. So I need to save it. And every time I switch over, it opens up my menu screen. Okay, so now it just says Pygame Zero game. And it's actually 800 by 600 by default, I believe. So, but I still want to set it to show you how to set it in case you ever want to use other resolutions. But yeah, again, you can see that it is setting the icon. Now, if I were to set this like this right here, I don't think this is going to work. Now, I'll just try it here too, just to see. Yeah, it doesn't even work. It doesn't like it at all. And we're using Pygame 2, but what version of Pygame 0 we're using? We're using STL, Python 3. I'm not sure what version of Pygame we're using. I think it's like 1.2 something. But yeah, so, and if we put this as PNG, I think it still doesn't work. And let's just try it in here, just to show you. Still doesn't work. So we need the whole relative path, not the whole path, but the entire relative path. So images, and that should work. We'll try it back over here. Perfect. Okay, so let's just walk through the code. So if you're using VS Code, you'll probably need these to turn off the warnings. This, I'll actually just show what this does real quick. So the reason why that shebang is up there, and the reason it's called a hash bang or shebang is because it's a hash and a exclamation mark. And this is like an environmental directive. It's saying what kind of document this is. It's saying this is a Python document. The env, the environment, it just looks for Python. I could actually put user bin Python here as well, and different things. You'll see this sometimes in shell scripts and other scripts to let the system know what kind of file this is. So what happens is down here, I'm running Python. I'm saying, hey, Python, interpret main.py. Okay. I can't do this the way I would normally do it if this was just a program, is I would do this. I can't do that. Fish is like, I don't know what you're talking about. That's not even an executable file. That file can't be executed. So if I change it, if I do an ls, if I just do an ls, we'll find out this file, this main.py, is not executable. It's being read by Python, but it's not being executed itself. So I can, in Unix, Linux, or whatever, you can, or Mac OS or whatever, I could do chmod plus x on it and saying, hey, change the mode of this to an executable file. Now, if we look at it, it's executable. It's got the X on it. So if I go dot forward, that's just saying, hey, this item that's in this directory I'm in currently, execute that. Now this file is self-executable. I don't need to say Python. It just runs itself. Okay? And if I were to remove this up here, this shebang, that's not going to work, I don't think. I haven't actually tried this beforehand, but I can't comment it out because it's already a hash. Yeah, it doesn't know. It's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Is this a fish file? It thinks it maybe it's a fish or a bash file. It doesn't know what it is. So what that does is it just tells the system what this is. Okay, and let's find out where Python is. And it is, oh, okay. Yeah, it's just going to find Python for me, the env one. Because I'm in this virtual environment right now for Python. Because it again, from the beginning, it won't let you, since I install Python modules through Pacman, that's my package manager, it's saying, hey, Pacman is the one managing your Python environment. It just doesn't let me pip new packages into the system. It won't even let me do it into my home folder. And we saw that in the beginning when I tried to do the pip. Pip is the way you install Python modules. I do have Python on the system and everything else, but when I tried to do that, oh, I'm sorry, I'm in the, hold on, let me exit this. Okay. So this one, I'm not in that. I haven't sourced that special environment yet for Python. So if I run pip here, it's going to say, no, you can't. This environment is externally managed. I can't do that. And I'm just trying to do it locally. I'm not even trying to do it global. If I try to do this, okay, and I don't want to do the, what's that kid's name? Linus from Tech Tips, the guy that doesn't know anything about Windows, doesn't know anything about Linux, knows almost nothing about computers, makes videos about computers all the time, but he seems to not know how to run Windows. He didn't know what GitHub was, even though GitHub is owned by Microsoft. He didn't know how to get any information from GitHub, even though that is how you do it for all computers for the last 10 years or more. That guy, the guy that looked at the message on the screen and said, you should not do this. And then he went ahead and did that and deleted his system. You shouldn't do that. So down here, you can actually force it. It says break system packages. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be that Linus guy. That's a whole Python thing. So you have to do that whole setup that I did earlier about the, and I've already set it up. It would be the Python, this one, but it's already exists for me. And then when it exists, you source it with this source. And since I'm specifically using fish, not bash, if I was just using bash, I would do it like this. But since I'm using fish works a little slightly differently than bash scripts. They have a special fish one, and they have some other scripts, maybe ZSH, or I'm not really sure. We could look. Let's see here. Yeah, they have a CSH, a fish, and a normal one. So yeah, you have to kind of jump through those hoops. So let's just walk through this code real quick. So you need these for Pylint just to make it be quiet. You don't need this at all. You don't need this, obviously. You can leave it out. You can bring in random if you want, or from random, import randint, however you want. You do need to import PGZ run, and you may or may not get warnings or errors on that. These are built into Pygame Zero, so it's looking for these. So if you set them, it uses them. You got a width, a height, a title, and an icon. We're just making a game class, so we have no global variables, and this is just the initializer constructor, whatever the Python calls its constructor thing for classes. But and there is a funny name for this thing, and I forgot what it is. I'm just making a string. I'm holding a string as a background. I'm just holding that string. And the color is just a tuple RGB 0 to 255. That would be a uint8 tuple to hold a color. And we have the draw, and this is using the screen.fill and instead of screen.clear. Screen.clear would just clear it to black if you want, but since we want a color, I'm using screen.fill, and since it switched it to 3 lines, I have to put this telling it to ignore it. I need to put this on the top line, the line that the screen is on, to make it stop complaining. So I'm using that variable that I created up here, which is just black, and you could just use the tuple in there instead. I just pulled it out into a variable. And to blitz something, we are just blitzing the actual string. If it sees the string, it just loads it up automatically for you. And this 0, 0 is the X and the Y. So imagine the screen has an origin, which is the top left corner, right up here. But for 800 by 600, it was actually over here somewhere. And my image that I'm loading is also 800 by 600. So I'm saying, hey, the top left corner of my image, put that in the top left-hand corner of the screen. So this 0, 0 is saying where to put the top left-hand corner of my image. And I'm saying put it in the top left-hand corner of the screen. So that's what that does. Update, we're doing nothing, but I'm still putting pass here so it actually sees it. It just runs through it. But if this doesn't exist, or more importantly, this one down here doesn't exist, then it's not going to work correctly. And we could just do this real quick and see what that looks like now. I don't think I saved it, sorry. I could just run it like this now. And yeah, so it's kind of messed up. So definitely need that in place. Okay, so yeah, nothing's happening there, but we do need to see it just so the Pygame Zero runs correctly. To get random colors, we're using randint, or either random.randint, or since we used from random import randint, we can just call it directly. This doesn't need to be seeded, and this is giving us an range, and it's including both sides of the range. So it's 0 to 255. It's going to give us a random number, including 0 and including 255. We're just doing that 3 times for the different colors and putting it here, setting our screen color variable tuple to that. And that is automatically being used in the screen fill every frame, every time it refreshes. Here we're just instancing our game object from our game class. We are defining here the built-ins, the on key down, the draw, and the update. This one we're just checking the keys here, escaping or calling our game rand color. Here, draw just calls game draw, update just calls game update. And this is actually running the Pygame Zero right here. So that's all that we have for this one. I hope you enjoyed that. Like I said, there was a rant at the beginning. It's just because if you are a brand new person to programming, you're going to have to follow all these steps and hope that I got everything for your system, which I may not have, or you might just end up being really frustrated. So I would really suggest, if you're new to programming, that you go and check out Love2D and Lua. You can look at my videos on that, or you can look at somebody else's videos on that, or you can read the documentation, the website, everything. That is the best place to start out. Lua is an excellent language, and Love is an excellent 2D library for game development, just like Pygame Zero and Pygame and all those. But the Love 2D one is definitely better. It's light years better than this. And the only bugs you should have is when you accidentally made a bug yourself, not bugs in the system, and you don't have to know that you need to put update in place. Okay, so again, I hope you enjoyed that one. That's going to be all for this, and thank you for watching. Bye.